Hey guys, welcome to the Seagull Football Network. I'm Braden, this is my brother Ben. We are starting our deep dives into the NFL divisions as we come up to the start of the season. It's off season right now, so we're just going to be going through teams, talking about their strengths, their weaknesses, things we like, things we don't like, and going two teams at a time through every division in the NFL. Today we are starting off with the NFC East, and we're going to be doing the best and worst team from that division. First, though, we do have a couple items of news to go through. New Orleans Saints quarterback Derek Carr did announce that he is retiring from the NFL. This is coming off of a shoulder injury that he started experiencing earlier this year. Reports were saying that he wasn't able to throw past 20 or 25 yards without a lot of significant pain. It looked like he was going to have to get another surgery on that shoulder, and he elected to pass on the surgery and said he was going to go ahead and retire. Honestly, he was a pretty solid quarterback for most of his career. He had a couple down years the last couple seasons, which were tough to see. But his career in Las Vegas and Oakland were pretty solid overall. So not a Hall of Famer necessarily. I definitely don't think he's that caliber, but he was a fun quarterback to watch while he played. So sad to see him go. In other Derek news, the Baltimore Ravens did extend running back Derrick Henry today on a 2-year extension worth $30 million total, with $25 million of that guaranteed. Ben, what are your opinions on these two bits of news?
First off, Derek Carr, I would definitely say, is the better Carr of the two. Not necessarily because of talent, but at least he was in a much better situation. Obviously, it's always sad to see somebody retire, but Derek Carr did an incredible job throughout his career. It's unfortunate he only ever got that one playoff game that he didn't even play in. He brought his team to the playoffs, but he was injured. That shoulder injury, there was a lot of talk that maybe he was playing up a shoulder injury because he was afraid that New Orleans would draft a QB and he wanted to get out of there before they did so and before he had to compete against somebody, that maybe he was looking for a new place to play. And that I can see where that came from, but a report came out shortly after he retired that he did not want to risk long-term damage to his shoulder. He didn't really want to get a surgery that would eventually decline his ability to use his shoulder at all. So he elected for retirement, and this is permanent. He's not sitting here waiting for a contract out with New Orleans. He really, really wants to take time for his family, for his kids. He wants to be able to throw with his kids. So I understand that. I think he saw it as the perfect time to do so instead of muscling through another surgery. If it were, if he were 30 and he was still in Las Vegas, it's a new coaching staff. He's 34, 35 years old. At this point, he's just going to go while he's still on top, and that makes sense to me. As for Derrick Henry, $25 million guaranteed over 2 years. Most of his contract is guaranteed. It's an incredible signing, taking after Saquon Barkley. The running backs are having a resurgence in terms of contract, and I'm a huge fan. Henry showed really no signs of regression last year, and I can only hope that he continues to play at that level. He was on track for 2,000 yards for most of the season, and I mean, Baltimore's got the line to do it, and they've got the scheme to do it. So I'm super excited to see what Henry can do for the rest of the season.
Speaking of Saquon Barkley and the Eagles, though, we are going to start by talking about the Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's kick it off with the greatest strength. Ben, what do you see as their biggest strength going into the 2025 season?
I was on record last year that the Eagles were one of my favorite teams in the NFL, and I'm really happy that that paid off, especially after the conversations we had, right? And I'm really excited to see the Eagles again this year. I think you and I are probably going to differ a little bit on them even this year after the Super Bowl win. But I'm a big fan of the Eagles once again. And once again, one of my greatest strengths for them is their coaching staff. I believe that the team is incredibly drafted. They have great depth, very good starters on both sides of the ball. Maybe not elite starters, but that's kind of the point. Is they don't need elite starters. Howie Roseman gets them good football players, and it's up to the coaching staff to make them great, if it's mental or physical. What we saw in 2023 was a very different team than in 2022 and in 2024. And I kind of talked about the reasoning for that last year. If you guys went and watched the deep dive from last year, that is because of the quality of the coaching staff. After Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon left in 2022 to become head coaches on their own teams, Nick Sirianni, in my opinion, an elite CEO head coach. He's the best CEO head coach in the NFL this year. He did not do so well on a more minute level. He had to manage a lot more things, Him and Brian Johnson had some philosophical disagreements. But in 2024, when he brought in renowned offensive coordinator Kellen Moore and legendary defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, things changed very quickly. Obviously, he's retaining Vic Fangio. Fangio has said that he's pretty content to retire in Philadelphia. He's from that area. And Kellen Moore took his first head coach job in New Orleans, leaving Sirianni to elevate yet another offensive coordinator. Excuse me. Last time it was Brian Johnson. This time he promoted a coach he's known for a very, very long time, and that is Kevin Patillo. Patillo served as passing game specialist and coordinator in Indianapolis and Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni. He's got a lot of experience in the West Coast offense, and he was the associate head coach role for the last 3 years with Sirianni. That means Sirianni really trusts him. For those of you who don't know, the difference between an assistant head coach and an associate head coach is an assistant head coach is a lot more managerial type of things. They're focused on making sure the practice schedule is ready, making sure that travel is all set up, and making sure that player coach disagreements are settled, player disagreements are settled. They're a lot more just day to day things. Whereas an associate head coach is essentially think like what a vice president is to a president. Their job is to help manage the things that the head coach manages. It's a lot of usually an associate head coach is much older or more experienced than the head coach, and he is somebody that the head coach goes to for advice, for pointers, for a second opinion on things. Hey, when I said this thing to this player, what did you think about it? Or hey, when we make this decision in a game, how do you think it's going to play out? Or you've seen this a million times, what do you think we should do in this scenario? Things like that. And with Patillo in position, I believe the coaching staff will be on the same level as last year's. I think that he understands what Sirianni wants to execute, and I think that's very different than what happened in 2023. We will not have a Brian Johnson situation in 2023. Like I said, Johnson was a great coach. He had a lot of experience in the West Coast systems, but he had very different philosophies than Sirianni in how he wanted to execute certain plays, how he wanted to treat quarterback Jalen Hurts, and it created a lot of internal strife. It's been heavily documented. Patillo doesn't have that because him and Sirianni have been together for so long. Johnson was brought in, I think, like 2 years before he became offensive coordinator, whereas Patillo's been around since 2018 with Sirianni. With this coaching staff's continuity, I think this team will once again be in the Super Bowl conversation very late in the season, and I look forward to seeing them there in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Sirianni. I've been pretty open about that, and I'm not convinced on Patello. Hertz's performance tends to vary widely based on who his offensive coordinator is. So I'll see it when I believe it. I think it's definitely possible that he can maintain the same level of performance with Patello, but like I said, I'm going to want to see it first. I did go a different direction for the greatest strength, and that is the Eagles' secondary. Despite losing a couple key players on the defense, the secondary has remained very, very strong, led by corners Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, who were standout performers last season, as well as safety Reed Blankenship. They look to maintain consistency across the back end of their entire defense. They did lose C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but Tristan McCullum or Sidney Brown, I think, can easily kind of fill in that spot and play safety at just about the same quality that C.J. Gardner-Johnson did. In 2024, they did finish with the best passing defense in the league. They kind of stole that away from the Titans there in the last couple weeks of the season. And with Vic Fangio, like you said, leading the charge once again, I think the Eagles secondary is going to be, by my approximations, the second best in the league this season. I expect really, really great things from that secondary.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. The secondary was definitely in my conversation for greatest strength. It proved it last year. Emphasis on the Super Bowl. That team is incredible. I do think Andrew Makuba is going to play that second safety spot. I see him rotating in early in the season, but I think he projects to C.J. Gardner-Johnson's skills pretty much perfectly. So I think Makuba is going to play very soon, and he's going to make a big impact very quickly.
That's fair. I do like Sidney Brown quite a bit in that spot. I think Sidney Brown would be a pretty easy slot in as well. But I see what you're saying with Makuba as well.
Yeah, it could be either one for sure. Next up for me, we talked about the greatest weakness, and for me it was pretty straightforward, and that is their offensive line depth. I think something that every Super Bowl team gets lucky on is avoiding injuries, and something that Philadelphia was lucky on this past year specifically was avoiding injuries on the offensive line. Now, they can't always be that lucky. No team can always be that lucky. In addition to losing starting guard Mekhi Becton to free agency, they lost multiple rotational offensive linemen such as Nick Gates and Jack Driscoll. Uh, that isn't necessarily the worst thing. General Manager Howie Roseman, as I talked about, he's incredible at filling holes well before they become issues on the roster. But just with the amount of new blood at the position, such as rookies Drew Kendall, Miles Hinton, Cameron Williams, that could spell trouble if they have injuries down the line. Their offensive line coach is the best in the league. Again, Howie Roseman knows his talent, but it's just so much new offensive line depth coming in on a team that, like I said, happened to avoid injuries last year. It could cause issues for them. So that's definitely my weakness.
Yeah, that's fair. I went to a very similar place with offensive skill position depth. Um, Obviously, like depth isn't the most interesting category to talk about when we're talking about weaknesses for a team, but the Eagles roster is so strong all around that it's really kind of the place to go to. That being said, the lineup of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley sounds infinitely better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jahan Dotson, and A.J. Dillon, which I picked out as kind of the three potential next up guys in those three positions. So, fingers crossed that they have no injuries because I think that could really devastate that team's chances overall at making the playoffs or a Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I'm a little bit more of a fan of Jahan Dotson. I think that he didn't really get a chance necessarily in Washington, and I think that what Philadelphia is very good at is bringing in players who maybe didn't necessarily have the best chances back where they were, and giving them those chances in their new offense. So I think Jahan Dotson could be something. They did also sign Terrace Marshall, former Carolina Panthers second rounder who was with Las Vegas last year. But again, I agree with you 100%. Like, it's certainly not the level of their starters. So if anything happens, and like we said, they avoided those injuries last year, it could be a very different season than what we saw in 2024.
Let's talk about best veteran addition. Who did you pick out for the Eagles?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually not a free agency move, which I think is what we'll mostly be seeing. For me, it was a trade, and that is the Houston Texans offensive guard Kenyon Green. Philadelphia, this was where they traded away safety CJ Gardner Johnson. For the second time he leaves Philadelphia, he was with them in 2022. He signed in free agency with the Detroit Lions in 2023 and then re signed with Philadelphia in 24, but they just traded him away. They traded Gardner Johnson for offensive guard Kenyon Green. It was pretty much a 1-to-1. However, Philadelphia also got a 1-round upgrade in 2026 from the 6th round to the 5th round. So overall, in my opinion, that's a win for Philadelphia. It could be very good for Houston too, but we'll just see how the cards fall. Kenyon Green, a former first rounder, has struggled with injury throughout his career, but has been average to solid while on the field for the Texans. Does that sound familiar to you? It should, because that is nearly identical to the new Los Angeles Chargers guard, Mekhi Becton. Green was drafted 15th overall. Becton was drafted 11th overall by the New York Jets as a tackle and struggled some to stay healthy, play consistently at tackle. However, Philadelphia signed him in 2024. Many expected as kind of a backup swing tackle, but they shifted him into guard, where he was able to focus on his elite strength and run blocking ability, and he became a top end guard for the Eagles' mauling unit. That number one unit, Becton was a large part of that. However, once again, part of Howie Roseman's drafting strategy and free agency strategy is, hey, we can replace somebody like him. We brought him in. It was a reclamation project. Consider him reclaimed. Let him go sign for a bunch of money somewhere else. Let's bring in a new Mekhi Becton. And that is what Green is. And I don't necessarily think that he will start, but if Green can produce even half that as a starter, I project him to be much better than what many suppose to be the current Becton replacement, Tyler Steen, who's a former third rounder from 2023, who's yet to see the field full time at all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Honestly, I thought Kenyon Green was, he's not great, but I thought he was decent. I thought he's played generally better than Mekhi Becton up until obviously last season. So I think he really could be a good fit there. I ended up going to the other side of the ball. I picked out Aziz Ojolari. I don't think he's going to be able to fully replace Josh Sweat. Obviously, Sweat had an incredible season last year before getting signed by the Arizona Cardinals. But he's a solid player coming to fill in at a position of need. Um, he did have a little bit of an up season again in 2024, finishing with 6 sacks. Um, but he still hasn't really reached that potential that he flashed in his rookie season, where he had 8 sacks. I think, though, if he's going to kind of reach that potential, the Eagles are the place to do it. I think they've got really good defensive line development, especially. They take a lot of really physically talented guys and they make them really, really solid players on the defensive line. And so I think Ojulari is a really good fit there in Philadelphia. Yeah, so that's my veteran edition. Now we're going to talk about what the best rookie edition was for the Eagles. Ben, who did you pick out?
Yeah, so for me, I was actually a very big fan of the defensive tackle Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. He was the fourth round pick, 111th overall. This is a pick that, again, Howie Roseman's great with his mid round, late day two, early day three picks. And Ty Robinson is that. Ty Robinson, in my opinion, is the new Milton Williams. Williams signed a massive deal with the New England Patriots this offseason, but he was a great three tech for Vic Fangio in 2024. His strengths were good hands, run stopping, elite pass rushing from the interior. Ty Robinson, for some context here, has the most tackles for loss by a Nebraska player since Ndamukong Suh back in college in 2009. Sue, for viewers who might not know, was the second overall pick in 2010. He was an elite interior defensive lineman for many, many years. And I think Ty Robinson, he won't be Sue. He won't be Sue, but he will be a very good defensive lineman. He had top end 40-yard and 10-yard times, as well as vert and broad jump measurements. Give Fangio 1 year with Robinson, and I think he will be the same level as Milton Williams. He'll be a top end interior defensive lineman in the NFL because that's what Vic Fangio is best at, is developing defensive linemen. And Ty Robinson is the perfect amount of raw talent with the perfect amount of already developed strengths and talents that I think Vic Fangio is going to love him, and I think it's great value at 111.
I stayed on that side of the ball as well. I did go with defense, but I went with their first round pick, Jihad Campbell. Obviously, I talked about him quite a bit in our draft look ahead dives. The Eagles did consider trading up a lot farther than 31 to get Campbell. Reports were saying they were looking at trading up, I think, to 20 or 21 because they were concerned about him still being on the board. And I can understand exactly why they would trade up to get him. He is a beast of a man. Um, like I talked about, he's got the ability to be in exactly the right place at the right time. He reads plays like nobody else, and I think putting him on a defense with where Vic Fangio is calling the plays is going to make him really, really deadly. And I especially like pairing him up with Zach Bond in the middle. Zach Bond, obviously, really solid in coverage. Jihad Campbell, good in coverage, good against the run. I think that's a really solid pairing there. Kind of a 1-2 punch at the linebacker position.
Yeah, and something to add context there is the current starter at middle linebacker across from Zach Bond is Nakobe Dean, who the injury that he had is escaping me. I want to say it was an Achilles or an ACL, but he is likely to be out at least for the beginning of the season, if not the full 2025 season. And that is also his fourth and final year on his contract with the Eagles. Not to say that they won't re-sign him, but he was only a starter for last year. It was his first year as a full-time starter, so we really don't know what player they have in Nakobe Dean. He was very good while he was on the field, but that's just while he was on the field. He was not a starter in 2022. He hurt himself early in 2023, and he hurt himself late in 2024. So it's just we don't really know who we have, and he's an injury-prone player. So drafting somebody like Jihad Campbell is the perfect replacement for Nakobe Dean to play across from recently extended Zach Bond.
Definitely. That being said, let's talk about what we think the Eagles' record in the 2025 season is going to look like. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I project them at pretty much what they had last year at 14-3. I think they have a floor, frankly, of 12-5. I do not think that this team can go much lower than that, if that at all. They are very, very good this year, and I would be very surprised to see them go lower than that. And my ceiling for them is 15-2. I don't see them going undefeated because that's just highly unlikely for any team. But 15-2 is a very good team. I don't think anybody's won more than 15 games in a season since the 17 game change. So again, I'm super excited about the Eagles. I think that they're highly likely to be in the Super Bowl once again in 2025. What do you think?
I'm a little bit less optimistic. Just generally, I'm not as big a fan of Jalen Hurts. I don't like Sirianni as much, but also they play a lot of really difficult teams this season. A couple that I kind of pulled out are the Broncos, the Rams, the Bucks, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Vikings, the Bills, and of course, we can't forget that they play the Commanders twice a season. And while they did beat them twice last year, they did also lose one to the Commanders. So they can definitely be a factor there as well. I have their projected record at 11-6, with a ceiling of 15-2. I think they definitely could pull that off if everything goes their way, with a floor of 9-8. I think if there are a couple things that could happen there, they could drop a couple of those games there, and then an injury could occur, or the offensive coordinator doesn't quite reach that same potential that Kellen Moore did with Jalen Hurts. And so I think there's just a couple factors that I'm not fully convinced on. That put that floor there, but I'm definitely leaning on the higher end there with the 11-6.
I totally see it. I will say the fall apart season, the crash out season that they had in 2023, they still won 11 games. That just speaks to the level of Philadelphia's roster. So I can see it happening, but I would be really surprised if they win only single digit games.
I don't think their schedule was that tough that year though. Like I don't know. This is a really really difficult schedule, up and down. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. All right. That being said, we're going to move on to the worst team from the NFC East, and that is the New York Giants. Ben, what do you see as their greatest strength in 2025?
Yeah, so I'm on record, both last year and this year, to say I do not like the New York Giants. I do not think that they are a good team this year. Um, and I think that they really should have fired everybody at the end of 2024. However, they didn't. And they drafted a QB, which arguably resets their clock in terms of how long they stay because they can make the argument, oh, well, we suffered with Daniel Jones for as long as you wanted us to. The people before us signed him to a bunch of money and now we got to deal with it. There's an argument to be made that, they say, okay, this is our guy, give us 2 or 3 years with him. So maybe they bought themselves some time. Anyway, their greatest strength for me is their defense. I don't think that that's saying a lot, but I am arguably, I will say, I am surprisingly impressed with what they did with this defense. First off, picture this. It's third and medium, late in the fourth quarter. Your team's down by 4. You can only get a touchdown. Third and medium, it's tough to run on, but you can do it. You can pass on it, but you just have to see what the situation is late in the fourth quarter. Across from you are Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence. What do you do? What do you do? You can't run on that. And good luck making enough time to pass against that rush. They throw two more guys in there. You got less than a second probably to make a read. That's a great improvement from what they've done in the last 5 years or so. Now, Shane Bowen, defensive coordinator, did a great job with his scheme, covering up a lot of deficiencies they had this past season. But general manager Joe Shane promised to bolster the run defense this offseason, and that he did. They signed interior defensive lineman Roy Robertson Harris in the offseason, who's shown great positional versatility from outside to inside. And they drafted Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander, who I imagine those two will share snaps in the middle of the line. They also drafted Abdul Carter third overall. And like I said, he's an absolute game wrecker in the run and the pass. With Bowen, I really think he has the potential to be a third down player off the bat. And hopefully they will also get a full healthy season out of Brian Burns, like I said. Add on to this, they signed cornerback Paulson Adebo and safety Javon Holland to an already solid secondary featuring Deontay Banks, Tyler Nubin, a couple other players, and a solid linebacking core of Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden, who I think will look better with stronger front and back behind them and in front of them. Obviously, this defense can't win games all by itself. They need a functional offense. But I am really impressed with what they've done. And with 1 year under Bowen's scheme, I think it's certainly going to see improvements starting in week 1.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I also picked out the defense. You pretty much said everything that I had written down as well. I love the addition of Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland. the Abdul Carter signing or drafting is obviously huge for that team. There was a little bit of chaos as to what number he was going to wear, but I think they finally got that settled now. Um, yeah, I totally agree. This is by no means the best defense in the league. Potentially top half if they really pull themselves together and you know do something great. But it is for sure looking a lot better than last season, and could be a pretty strong defense in this league. Now that does bring us to the greatest weakness. What did you kind of identify for the Giants?
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before this, and you did disagree with this, but hear me out. And my greatest weakness for the New York Giants is the wide receiver room. In my opinion, if they do not do something about this room very, very soon, Malik Neighbors is going to be the first wide receiver in NFL history to get 300 targets in a season. The current most targets in a season is 205 by Marvin Harrison, and I think he could blow that out of the water. I'm serious. They re-signed Darius Slayton this offseason, but I mean, he's been an okay number two. He's nothing special, and he is aging and showed it last year. Wan'Dale Robinson really needs to be talked about. He is 100% a bust at this point. He was drafted at 43rd. We don't talk about that enough. 43rd overall, and he's got like the most yards he's had in a season is like 690, I think. That's not okay. That's pretty bust oriented in my opinion. Obviously, they signed Emir Smith Marset and Zach Pascal this offseason, but really they've been bouncing from roster to roster for a few years now. And this just overall, this room just isn't inspiring. With either aging Russell Wilson, who can't move around in the pocket anymore, or Jameis Winston, who has a great arm but questionable hero ball decisions. And on a team like the Giants, you've got to make a lot of hero ball decisions. Or Jackson Dart, who's a rookie. He came from an oversimplified single look Ole Miss offense. They need a lot more weapons in the receiver room if they want to make noise outside of their running back room, which is okay. It's pretty good, but they need a whole lot more passing weapons.
Yeah, so like you said, I did disagree a little bit. I just can't put any receiver room that has Malik Neighbors in it as the biggest weakness for any team. I think Malik Neighbors does enough to elevate that wide receiver room, um, to make it better than what I picked out as the greatest weakness, which is that quarterback room. Um, and by proxy, then the whole offense, but primarily I would blame the quarterbacks here. This room stinks. It's not good. We all want to see Jameis Winston suit up and play. I think that's the best case scenario for the Giants. I think that's the best case scenario for Malik Neighbors. I think we all kind of want to see a little bit of that connection. The Jameis Winston launch it deep. Neighbors is down there somewhere. But the Giants already confirmed that their starting quarterback is going to be Russell Wilson, at least on day one. We don't know how much that's going to last, but at least for the beginning of the season, we're going to see Russell Wilson. I don't think we need to talk too much about Tommy DeVito. I don't think he's going to see the field again for the Giants unless something goes terribly wrong. No, I mean he wasn't even on the roster a couple months ago, so I think he'll be the first to go from this room. Now, all of this being said, I think that Russell Wilson starting is actually good news for one of the quarterbacks in this room, and that is Jackson Dart, like you mentioned. I think this is going to give him a lot of time to sit, learn and adapt to the NFL, to the speed, to the defenses. And I think most importantly, it's really going to kind of teach him a lot of the what not to do's when it comes to the NFL. I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff for him to learn from Russell Wilson, positives and negatives. But I think both are important just to be able to learn and to be able to see. And I think it sets him up for a potentially really solid 2026 if they can then tack on maybe another receiver. I agree. The receiver room is not incredible. I like Jalen Hyatt. I like Darius Slayton to an extent. I like Wan'Dale Robinson to an extent. I think they have a lot of really solid like 3s and 4s, and they have a clear number 1. I think now they just need a clear number 2, and they'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, I like your take. I like your take, especially the Jackson Dart bit. I am on record to say that Jackson Dart's got a very good arm, but he has like no quarterback experience. Okay, you can throw it and not know how to play quarterback, and that's something that Dart needs to learn very quickly if he's going to be starting. So it's a good thing that he's in a room with two very experienced starters. If Dart does not play a single snap in 2025, that's going to be the best case scenario for him. I think that if he's able to learn an offense this year and then come in next year and make an impact, that is what's best for him. So I agree with you. I think that Jackson Dart has the ability to be a long-time starter in the NFL if he takes that time. So I like that take a lot.
Unfortunately, there's a pretty good chance that he has a totally new coaching staff next year, but that's a totally separate issue.
Well, there's also a good chance that the Giants coaching staff panics and starts Jackson Dart this year. Whether that's week 1 or week 14, they might they very well could rotate through Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Dart this year, and that's not a good look at all for a coaching staff that expects to be kept long term. And I think that if they panic, Dart's going to be the first one they throw out there. They say, "Oh, we're about to get fired, rookie go."
Alrighty. Who did you pick out as the Giants' best veteran addition this offseason?
Yeah, my veteran addition is Miami safety Javon Holland. I am a big fan of Javon Holland. I think he was one of the best safeties in the league the last couple of years for Miami. And I will say, according to PFF, he was a top 5 ranked safety in coverage in 2024. And he replaces the Giants' former starter was Jason Pinnock, who is now he was PFF one of their worst ranked safeties in 2024. So I feel like that's a pretty good move by the Giants. And also, defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, I already talked about him a little bit. He's great with roaming safeties who can also run fit, and Holland is a great fit for that defense. His best seasons as a safety came under former Miami head coach Brian Flores, who has schematic similarities with Shane Bowen, especially emphasizing aggressive safety play. For the record, Bowen came from Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel came from the New England coaching staffs, and Brian Flores also came from New England. So they kind of have the same philosophies when it comes to players, especially coverages, and that's kind of where that safety similarities come from. And again, Javon Holland is a great fit for the New York Giants.
Yeah, for sure. I liked that signing quite a lot as well. I went with their other big secondary signing, though, in Paulson Adebo. He seems to have a knack for being where the ball is and taking it away, which is something that the Giants defense really needed added. It's a crucial aspect to defense and something that they've struggled with the last couple of years. Adebo has 3 or more interceptions in 3 of his 4 seasons in the NFL, and I like how he's going to fit in New York. One of the other things I really love about him is his attitude. He was one of the guys who I first saw doing flip to the other sideline and just 2 thumbs down at them every time he broke up a pass. And he's got that mentality. He's going to be up in your face. He's going to be working hard. And I think he brings a lot of energy to the defense there in New York.
Yeah, I agree. I will say I talked about it in our draft live stream. I wasn't, super happy about the Adebo signing, but the more that I looked into their signings and their schemes and all of that, it definitely grew on me. I didn't realize how good in zone coverage Adebo has been in the past couple of years. He's one of the best ranked corners in zone, and that's a great fit for Shane Bowen. Another thing that I did notice, diving into statistics and advanced stuff, is Holland and Adebo both allowed under 60% completions every year they've been in the league. Which coming from a safety especially is very impressive. But both players allowing under 60%, that's incredible. That's incredible. And for the Giants to get them both again, put them in Shane Bowen's defense, that's a great move from them. And so like I'm not a big fan of Joe Shane, but that's probably 2 of his best moves in his career.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of best moves in his career, let's talk about the best rookie that he possibly could have drafted, Abdul Carter. I sang enough of his praises leading up to the draft. I don't think we need to go through all of that all over again. But I firmly believe that Carter, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau kind of rotating through will form a deadly front for any quarterback they face. And, they play the Eagles twice a year, so that could actually be a little bit of a problem for that Eagles offensive line. I picked out Abdul Carter as their best rookie. I think you did as well, right?
Well, I'll start with they are incredibly lucky that he fell to 3. And that sounds silly because usually you're sitting looking at teams that were picking in the 20s and saying, wow, it's so lucky that this player fell here. The fact that Abdul Carter fell to 3, they're lucky. Obviously, Tennessee was likely to take Cam Ward, but frankly, if they had taken Abdul Carter, it would have tracked. Like that's how good of a player he is. And then Cleveland picking at 2 at first. I thought they were going to go Carter. They obviously moved out and took Mason Graham, and I'm a huge fan of that move, especially the trade down in general. And honestly, when Jacksonville traded up, I think we in the live stream we both settled on Travis Hunter before the pick was made, but I could have seen them going for Carter as well. So again, incredibly lucky that he even fell that far. Carter's an incredibly versatile player. He played linebacker and defensive end at Penn State, and once again, calling to that scheme. Shane Bowen probably, I mean, got a little overexcited in that draft room when he realized that they were going to end up with him. He's going to love playing him. Again, that's the reason that I think Carter can be a 3-down starter from the get-go. I wasn't thinking that he would be in most schemes, but Bowen's going to be able to, shift him around so much on various downs and distances that I think he'll actually make it work. Frankly, in my opinion, expect a Micah Parsons type season from Carter, playing at all types of positions, collecting plenty of tackles for loss and sacks along the way. And I really think this defense could actually be competitive next year. Leave it up to the offense to screw everything up, but I really, really do think they can be competitive.
Yeah, I agree completely. That does bring us to the projected record. Now, it's worth noting. I think we both last season said 0-17 was our projection for the Giants. They did surprise us. They won a couple. They did a little better than that. Where do you stand with their projected record for 2025?
Yeah, my projection lies right around where they were last year. I think we're going to see more statistical improvement from this team than we will record improvement. And once again, I really do think that the coaching staff needs to go, even if there is statistical improvement, because I think that with a better coaching staff, the team will get better because the roster is solid in some places. However, my projection for them is 4-13. Last year, I like we talked about, my floor was 0-17. My floor for them now is 1-16. So we see a little bit of improvement in terms of how many wins we think they can get. And for ceiling, I have 6-11, but they'd be hard pressed to get there.
Yeah, I'm right in there about the same place. I'm projecting 3-14. I'm a little less optimistic generally. Ceiling of 6-11, so I agree with you there. But the floor I have at 2-15. Um, so again, listen, I'd be happy if they surprised us again. If they win a couple more games, that'd be great. I'm rooting for them. I do really like kind of the direction that the roster is trending, but I'm gonna need to see some coaching adjustments before I fully believe that they're going to succeed more than that.
Especially on offense. Like I said, that defense with the moves that they made, the draft that they had, I really think that defense is going to look great. But defenses don't win games, and that's why I think they're still going to be at 4 wins unless we see some real improvement in terms of offensive scheme and execution. 4 wins is probably some of the best that they're going to get. It's going to be a stinky season again. Thanks so much again for watching. Next week, we're going to dive into the second half of the NFC East. That is the Washington Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys. From here on out until a couple of months from now, we're going to be diving into each division, 2 teams a week. And, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it. Now, this is Wednesday, May 14th. So at 8 p.m., the NFL schedule released. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check that out, definitely go look at that. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments about the NFL schedule. Let us know what your favorite team got and who their week 1 is, who their week 18 is, where your bye week is. What do you think your projections are for the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants? Again, we'd love to hear it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.